Hey everyone, and welcome to our Q&A presented by Just Love. My name is Paula Jane and I'm talking to Judy Carroll. Judy is an internationally known author. Her books include The Zeta Message, Human by Day, Zeta by Night, Extraterrestrial Presence on Earth, Lessons in History, and her two most recent books, both Kindle editions, An Interview with an Alien, Comments by an Undercover ET, and Cosmic Spirituality, Blending Religion and Science in Oneness from an Off-Planet Perspective. Hi, Judy.
Hi, Paula. Hi, everyone.
In this episode, I want to recap on the different races that we've spoken about earlier. It does get very confusing. So, the Draconians, an off-planet race, bioengineered, the Repterrans. Then the Palladians, and an earlier grey culture known as the Ant People, bioengineered the later Adam and Eve race from a half-human, half-primate mixture species that the Repterrans had created. So the sons of God who mated with the daughters of men is the story of a later integration between mammalian humans and reptoid humans, which resulted in the creation of the so-called Anunnaki or Nephilim. Here we have the Repterrans and the Anunnaki. So modern-day humans are made up of these two races. Is that correct?
No, not quite, Paula. You've summed it up really well in the first part of the question. But it's
So
very
confusing.
complex, as you can tell. So I'll just try to clarify it a little. This whole story is told in great detail in my Extraterrestrial Presence on Earth book, if people want to know more. Modern-day humans were not the first human race to be created on Earth. A very early culture that was bioengineered down here was the insectoid ant people, developed by the creator beings known as the mantids. These ant people were an early type of grey, and they were responsible for assisting in the terraforming of the planet and creating a viable ecosystem that would be able to support the higher forms of animal life that were evolving and all being brought in from other planets. They worked hand in hand with the elementals and nature spirits. Hello, I've got someone coming in. As soon as I start to cough, when I talk about the greys, they start moving in. The next humans to be created on Earth, this time by the Draconians, was a reptilian human culture that I call the Repterrans. They were bioengineered out of a biped dinosaur species. These Repterrans inherited advanced technology from their forebears, the Draconians, and were very aggressive. They took over the planet, attacking the ant people and eventually driving them either deep underground or else off the planet. Many of the ant people were resettled on the moon with the help of higher evolved insectoid beings. The Repterrans then decided to do some bioengineering themselves to create a slave race to carry out mining work for them. They were based in the area of the planet now known as the Middle East and Africa, and they selected a biped primate that had evolved to that stage of development. The bioengineering was fairly minor, just humanising them enough to enable them to follow orders and carry out simple tasks. These are the ones found by archaeologists as examples of early humans. The famous Lucy found in Africa is an example. I think these are the ones referred to by psychic Edgar Casey as the mixtures. These half-human, half-primate beings were exploited to the hilt and treated as beasts of burden. When other off-planet human cultures, such as the Pleiadians, Lyrans and Syrians, realised what was going on, they set out for Earth to try to stop it. This is where the Garden of Eden story comes into the picture. Safe areas were set up where further bioengineering could be done to humanise the mixtures further, to stop their exploitation as slaves. These off-planet people found the harshness of the Earth environment under the Repterrans almost unendurable. But when the ant people hiding deep underground became aware of their presence, they ventured to the surface to help them. The ant people took them underground for protection and assisted with the bioengineering program to upgrade the mixtures. The mixtures were kept safe in the protected areas, and through a process of further upgrading, they were provided with a higher percentage of off-planet human genetics. This is the reason why we try to emphasise that all modern-day Earth humans are actually ET hybrids. This upgrading of their DNA with off-planet DNA is what shifted the mixtures into the human kingdom, rather than them being trapped halfway between animal and human. The off-planet genetics added was mainly Pleiadian and Syrian. Of course, this upgrading was the last thing that the Repterrans wanted, to have their slaves taken away from them. So they hatched a plan to disrupt the humanisation program. This is told in Genesis as the story of the serpent in the Garden of Eden. The upgraded human DNA was interfered with, not enough to send them right back into the animal kingdom, but enough to keep them trapped in the herd instinct of their primate forebears. This outcome is symbolised in the biblical story of Cain and Abel, the two offspring of Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve are symbolic of the upgraded human species, but their offspring, the human culture that was born out of them, took the wrong path because of the interference. This is referred to as the fall of man and is symbolised in the story of Cain killing his brother Abel. Abel is symbolic of the higher self of humanity that the off-planet creator beings were trying to encourage and develop, and Cain is symbolic of the lower self that overcame the higher self because of the DNA interference, thus causing humankind to remain trapped in the animalistic herd instinct of fear, out of which jealousy, cruelty, greed, warmongering, racial and religious intolerance are born, as opposed to the virtues of compassion, kindness and sense of oneness born out of unconditional love. Further interference then took place when the so-called sons of God, the Repterrans, mated with the daughters of men, the partially upgraded mammalian humans. This resulted in a reptoid human species known as the Anunnaki or Nephilim being created. There's some confusion here because the Anunnaki are claimed by some to be tall, blonde, human-looking race that came from off-planet. As far as I understand, these blondes are just a form taken by some of the Repterrans or the Anunnaki. The Book of Enoch describes the fallen angels, or watchers, who was the Repterrans, as being tall, fair and handsome-looking people. The Repterrans are very talented shapeshifters who can take any form they want to. This is an important point to understand. The majority of the Repterrans here on Earth are now incarnating as perfectly normal-looking Earth humans. They are not in their reptoid form. This is how they're able to operate down here so covertly and how they can exert so much influence.
Thanks, Judy. Can you just read all that again? So what's playing out on the Earth plane right now is as a result of the controllers. You call them the Repterrans, who still actually control humanity and have done so since the very beginning. Off-planet intervention did take place to a certain degree, but they still held their control. Is that correct?
Yes. This is what's behind the evidence found in places like the Middle East and the Gobi Desert of the traces of nuclear weaponry being used. Some of the sands turned into glass from the incredible heat. A major war erupted over the control of the planet and the Repterrans drove the off-planet people away. Just a bit more information on the so-called blondes. Another Zeta person I know talks about a war that occurred long ago in the Reticuli star system in which the Zetas were attacked by a reptoid group in league with the blondes. I suspect that this war may have actually been here on Earth and involved the ant people, who were an earlier incarnation of the Zetas, and the Repterrans and Anunnaki. These blondes are the ones who influenced the Nazis with their ethnic cleansing program to cull humanity in order to create the tall, blonde, blue-eyed, Aryan ideal master race. This was more Repterran trickery to create prejudice and division. These ones are still present on Earth as part of the Repterran group, and their base is in a different dimension, which the Nazis call the inner Earth. This is why Hitler put time and effort into finding this so-called inner Earth. These human-looking Repterrans are the ones who often fool people by posing as angels, space brothers, Pleiadians, etc., to spread disinformation about the genuine off-planet people who are coming here again to try to free humanity from the enslavement that's still going on. It's never stopped.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So taking this into consideration and taking on board what you've said previously about all of us having the spark of the divine within us, the Repterrans included, There is a rhyme and reason for all of this, and that is to accomplish what we set out to do when we agreed to come here, to have our pre-birth purpose play out. We have to have the Repterrans here to present us with the free will choice between love and fear. So holding that understanding, we can see the Repterrans, the controllers, as one with us for the ultimate purpose in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, definitely. Our freedom as a planetary culture lies in choosing love over fear. But in order to be able to make that choice, we need to have both alternatives presented to us. A major part of practicing unconditional love is not by being drawn into racism and other forms of prejudice. Racism and religious intolerance are born out of fear. This was the energy behind the whole Nazi regime, and it still holds sway today very strongly and even extends beyond the planet. The whole E.T. contact scenario is full of it, with blonde, blue-eyed, human-looking beings considered to be good, while other not-so-human-looking beings, such as the Greys, are considered to be evil or even demonic. It's just unbelievable the number of humans who've been drawn into this cosmic racism, as my publisher calls it. Courtney Brown spoke of it in his book Cosmic Voyage. I've been subjected to it as a grey on a couple of occasions, with people refusing to speak to me. The whole extraterrestrial contact scenario is a massive test being given right now to Earth plane humanity to see who buys into the fear and who doesn't.
Yeah. So what else can you tell us about any of these consciousnesses, like the Anunnaki, for example? What is the significance of royalty and the Anunnaki?
Okay, modern-day humans carry varying amounts of different genetic bloodlines, Repterran, Anunnaki, and off-planet lines such as Pleiadians, Sirians, Zeta, etc. The Repterran Anunnaki line runs strongly in the royal bloodlines of the planet, hence their sense of entitlement and control, along with the determination to keep their bloodline pure. All Earth humans carry varying amounts of off-planet genetics, and the more off-planet genetics a person has, for example, Pleiadian, Sirian, Zeta, Mantid, etc., the less competitive and aggressive they are. Those carrying a higher percentage of grey genetics, which can be Zeta, Mantid, etc., all the insectoids, are particularly environmentally aware because it was the very early grey culture, the ant people, who were the original environmental scientists on Earth, who created ecosystems and promoted biodiversity when Earth was very young. They were the gardeners of the Earth. There's one Native American culture, can't remember which one it is, but they refer to the Greys, or those early ant people, as the moon people, because their legends tell of small, large-eyed beings that lived underground but came out at night in the light of the moon to tend the plants and to care for the earth. Another culture, the Hopi people, were taught and aided by the ant people to build natural dwelling places in caves. I've always related deeply to this, as I recall a life here in Australia as one of the ant people. This was around 900,000 years ago.
Yeah, wow. So, Judy, you mentioned something earlier which I would like you to comment on, especially now with everything that's going on in Afghanistan and everything that has played out in the Middle East since the very beginning. You said that when the Repterrans decided to do some bioengineering themselves, when they wanted to create a slave race to carry out mining work for them, they were based in the area of the planet now known as the Middle East and Africa. So can you talk to us on how this ties into this very day?
Yes, the Repterrans were a major part of the Atlantean culture, on which the Sumerian, Babylonian, Egyptian and other Middle Eastern cultures were based. The Sumerian word Anunnaki was the title given to them and their offspring in their role as founders of those cultures that were carried over from Atlantis. By that time, many of the Repterrans were incarnating in Earth human form, as they continue to do now. The Middle East was their base, so there's still a very strong Repterran controller influence there. This is why the three major world religions that had their birth there are influenced deeply by the controllers, who were and are extremely patriarchal in their outlook, putting females down as being somehow less and subservient to males. These religions are still in existence today. Some have changed to become more tolerant and egalitarian, but a fundamentalist core of intolerance and male domination still exists in these societies.
Yeah, which is proof of how the Repterrans are still controlling humanity to this day. And the more of us who can wake up to this, the easier the planetary shift will be. So if you want to read more about all of this, just to remind everybody, Judy's books are available from Amazon, or you can go directly through Judy's website, which is included in the link below. Most of this stuff is included in Judy's book, Extraterrestrial Presence on Earth. And if you liked this video, please share it with your family and friends and subscribe to this channel. And until next time, sending you all so much love, and thank you all for listening. Bye for now.